Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar titled Transitioning to the New Commis Chef and Team Member Apprenticeship Standards. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to explain a few things about our webinar platform to allow you to get the most out of the experience. All viewers will be in listen-only mode. However, to engage with the webinar, please use the on-screen panel. Using the tabs of this panel, you can adjust your audio settings and choose to see the webcam of our presenters if available. You can also use the question tab to engage with us. We expect that our webinar will be extremely popular, but our team will do our best to answer your questions and queries. During our webinar, we will be running a number of polls. To record your response, please click on the on-screen voting button when asked to do so. After the webinar, we will be providing a recording of the webinar, a copy of the slides, and a fact sheet to address any unanswered questions. Now I'd like to hand over to our presenters, Jason Benn and Bill Twig.
Thank you, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, transitioning over to the new Commis Chef and Team Member Apprenticeship Standards. My name is Jason Benn. I'm Industries Manager responsible for hospitality and catering here at City and Guilds, and I'm also joined by Bill Twig, Category Manager for Apprenticeships. So thank you for joining us. Okay. The agenda for this afternoon and this webinar, we will be covering an overview of the apprenticeships reforms, planning your transition, the Commis Chef occupation, team member occupation, planning your delivery and the points to consider, how we can support you and prepare you for delivery and endpoint assessment, some next steps, and a brief question and answer session. Okay, so the reforms, you may well be aware at this stage of the detail and background of the current reforms, and apprenticeships are changing and employers have already been part of that process. The most obvious change to the old, from the old standards to the new is that now the they are now employer-led occupational standards, and they've not been developed by City and Guilds, nor have they been developed by other awarding organisations or indeed the governments. So the design has been by the employer and led by a particular trailblazer group. Employers are in the driving seat, and this is the government's initiative to ensure that we have the employer involvement that we need. The old SASE frameworks basically consisted of qualifications, and you will already be aware that the occupational standards we are covering today, there is no qualification required within those. Okay, so funding, this has been simplified, and in the past qualifications typically dictated the delivery model, and the new standards provide effective training that is again driven by the employer. The difference between the SASE frameworks and the new standards, at a glance you can see clearly that there is a difference in the funding arrangements, and Commis Chef sits in band 9 at £9,000, which is significantly higher than the old frameworks, and team members is a band 7 at £5,000, and clearly this is an incentive to start planning your transition over to the new frameworks. I can also confirm that consultation has started regarding the switch off of the old frameworks, and this could potentially be the 31st of October 2017. So before we move on, I'd just like to start a quick poll. Thank you, Drew.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll do a quick poll. You should see it on the screens shortly. Okay, so this question is, to what extent does your organisation understand the changes to apprenticeships funding and delivery arrangements? You have a low level or little understanding, we have a medium level of understanding, a high level of understanding, or you need help in understanding the changes. We can see from the poll results that most of you have a medium level of understanding. That's very interesting.
Okay, so moving on, Maths and English. Funding is available for apprentices who have not previously attained a GCSE grade A to C or A star to C, and will support GCSE English language, Maths or functional skills as a result. In exceptional circumstances, the SFA will fund approved stepping stone qualifications to support progression to GCSE or functional skills. It's important to know that for the level 2 standards that we're talking about today, learners must achieve a level 1 qualification, and they must also be trained. You must have evidence that they've been training towards a level 2. Okay, so the Trailblazer Group, a working group of employers known as the Trailblazer Group, was set up for the level 2 standards Commis Chef and hospitality team member. They were developed by the group of employees that you can see in front of you now. And at a later stage, the awarding organisations were brought in to give assistance with the mapping and the assessment plans, but overall the 2 standards were essentially developed and driven by the employers. As you can see, there's a wide range, or a wide diverse range of employers, and the standards were developed to cover the wide range of industry job roles that they're specific to. The standards and assessment plan can be obtained from the website noted, and other standards can also be obtained from the People First website. So, developing skills, knowledge and behaviours to prepare apprenticeships for endpoint assessments. It is important to point out that a minimum of 6 meetings will be required, at least one every 2 months, and these need recording during the apprenticeship programme. The provider, the employer and the employer will need to build into the delivery plan the milestones against which progress can be reviewed against. On-programme records must be maintained, and this is important to support the apprentice. It's also important that the assessor and the employer are fully involved in monitoring the progress of the learning and the development to determine when the apprentice has achieved full competence in the job roles that they are preparing for and ready for endpoint assessments. So moving on to off-the-job training and the definitions of. Off-the-job training is learning which takes place outside of the normal day-to-day working environment, and this helps support the achievements of the apprenticeship. It can include training delivered at the normal place of work, but must not be delivered as part of the normal working duties. The off-the-job training does not include training which takes place outside the apprenticeships or the apprentice's paid working hours. The main duration of the apprenticeship is based on an apprentice working 30 hours. If this is not the case, which typically in our industry may be, then the apprenticeship may need to be reviewed and a pro rata will need to be taken into account. Anything not written into the standard as mandatory cannot be paid for by the government and must be paid for by the employer and cannot be part of the off-the-job training. So what does not constitute as off-the-job training? First of all, you've got the enrolment process, so the learner going through the enrolment process, this would not constitute off-the-job training. Induction doesn't. However, some of the things that we would typically get involved in, such as health and safety, food safety, risk assessments, cost training, possibly allergy training, they would constitute as off-the-job training in that time. Also, your diagnostic assessments or any prior learning that you may run prior to the apprentice coming on board, that would also not constitute as off-the-job training. Any English and Maths up to level 2, as this is funded separately. Progress reviews, whether on-programme assessment is needed for an apprenticeship standard or framework, should you include it in the qualification. Off-the-job training only delivered by distant learning. You can include online and blended learning activities, but distant learning must not be the only off-the-job training that takes place within that apprenticeship programme. Training that takes place outside the apprenticeship paid working hours, or the apprentice's paid working hours. Thank you. So, off-the-job training, it must be used to support the learner in achieving competence prior to passing through the gateway and achieving endpoint assessment. It must be planned in advance and planned together with the employer and the learner. Involving the employer is essential, as this may be able to support you with the off-the-job training within the workplace might be able to support you with the off-the-job training within their own organisation or through some of their own contacts or links that they may be able to provide. Off-the-job training is an excellent opportunity to enhance the apprentice's journey as they work towards endpoint assessment. So other suggestions for off-the-job training may include the teaching of theory, lectures on particular topics such as health and safety, food safety, etc., cost training, simulated exercises, role plays, possibly some online learning through webinars, blended learning, but obviously take care about the amount of online learning that you would use within the off-the-job training program. Manufacturer training, so if you're bringing in new equipment or new technologies into the workplace, then getting the learner involved in them particular processes, how to use the new equipment, the safety processes around it, etc., would really benefit and could also be classed as off-the-job training. Practical training, some work shadowing, receiving some mentoring and support, possible industry visits, visiting other companies and suppliers, possibly using your suppliers to obviously make contacts as well for the apprentice to go around and see new suppliers. They could provide many excellent opportunities to enhance the learner. Attendance at competitions, you can also consider internal competitions, regional, national competitions that will enhance the learner, and particularly with our type of endpoint assessment now, that would certainly gear them up in the right way to perform during endpoint assessments. Visiting other employer departments, learning support provided by you or the employer, the time spent by the apprentice writing assessments and assignments, possibly working on those presentation skills and then participating in presentations as well. You also need to look at the delivery time for some of the activities. Maybe masterclasses and competitions are ideal in term time holidays if you're working from a college perspective. Front-loading activities such as cost training, risk assessment training, food safety, health and safety, and basic skills development. That could be heavily front-loaded, and then using the back-loading it for revision purposes. So the commitment statements. The commitment statements is a collection of documents and information that's brought together to form a single point of reference relating to the learning that is taking place during the apprenticeship program. The important aspect relating to this evidence is that it must be kept to prove that the apprentice exists, and it's also your evidence to make sure that you're eligible for funding. It must be available to the SFA should it be required also, so it is an important document. The evidence pack must provide information such as the details of the negotiated costs that have been agreed between the employer and the provider, and the details of how the 20% off-the-job training will be quantified and delivered, excluding the English and Maths, details of how English and Maths will be delivered, details of employment, including the name of the employer and the agreed contracted hours of employment, including paid training and 20% off-the-job time, and the total planned length of the apprenticeship. Importantly, the commitment statement must be signed and dated by the apprentice, the employer, and the main provider. Okay, so Commis Chef standards. For all our occupational standards, the biggest changes are not having the qualification and moving to continual assessment, to endpoint assessment. So we're going to have a closer look at the Commis Chef standards. Okay, so a Commis Chef is the most common starting position in any kitchen, and in principle the most junior culinary role, as I'm sure we're all aware. Preparing food and carrying out the basic cooking tasks under the supervision of a more senior chef. The primary objective of the Commis Chef is to learn and understand how to carry out the basic functions in the within every section of the kitchen. And as a Commis Chef, they are going to develop a rounded experience of the people skills, food safety, an understanding of the business, whilst also developing their culinary skills that are required under this occupation. Essentially, assessment is split into three sections covering the knowledge, skills, behaviours and attitudes. And the criteria to be covered are found in the Commis Chef Occupational Standards, which is a standalone document outlining the criteria to be covered. However, more detail can be found in the assessment plan, which outlines the modules, the pass and distinction requirements, and the method of assessment. So the period of learning, development and continual assessment is managed by the employer, and in most cases will support with the support of the training provider. And the on-programme pace will be driven by obviously the individuals as well as the breadth of experience that the employer can offer prior to the minimum of 12 months, after which the endpoint assessment takes place. Employers should work closely with any training provider to plan and deliver support any training appropriately, and this working closely will add value to the employer as it centres on real work competencies demonstrated in the real working environment. And to drive quality and consistency through the on-programme learning, employers may wish to consider some of the following: the use of their normal performance management processes to monitor the progress of the apprentice, provide feedback and guide development. The training providers may support the training provider may support this, ensuring the requirements of the apprenticeship standards are reflected in the above process, so they do marry up. And by filling in any gaps throughout the work with the apprentice. So the employers and training providers, they must carry out joint reviews of progress at regular intervals, involving the apprentice, line managers and other direct relationships, e.g. for example, their mentors or workplace coaches, etc., should also be involved, and they should agree how any issues are to be resolved together, should there be any. Apprentices may develop and maintain examples of their work throughout their apprenticeship that cover the full standard. And this could be in the form of a portfolio or other tracking methods that you may wish to use to be reviewed on programme at intervals agreed by the employer and the training provider. For example, at the 2, 4, 6 months, etc. Points. The endpoint assessment is synoptic and takes place at the end of the apprentice's learning and development, and that will be after the 12 months on programme learning. So structured meetings will be held with the apprentice, the employer, and in conjunction with the training provider. An endpoint assessment must only take place when the employer is confident that the apprentice has developed the knowledge, the skills and behaviour defined within the standards. And at this point, the maths and English must be complete. So discussion would then take place with the apprentice, discussing the highs and lows and some of their achievements and challenges of the apprenticeship journey. And once this is complete, the apprentice can then be formally signed off that the minimum requirements in regards to knowledge, skills and behaviours within the standard has finally been met. And this will then confirm that they are ready to move on to endpoint assessment. So this will happen during a meeting involving the apprentice, the line manager and the trainer. And at this point, a further meeting is to be arranged to include the endpoint assessor, who must be provided with the completed readiness for endpoint assessment record at least 1 week in advance. So it's important that the completed readiness report is provided in advance. So the meeting can then be conducted remotely if more beneficial, and at this point you will agree a plan for the assessment activities which must be completed. Present the log of dishes, for example, if it's the Commis chef standards, that are to be prepared within the workplace and completion within a 2-month framework. So the on-demand test, the practical observation and the culinary challenge must be completed prior to the professional discussion taking place. So now just very, very briefly, we're just on the on-demand test. This is a 90-minute multiple choice and scenario-based test. It is externally set and marked by City and Guilds, and it can be undertaken on the employer's premises or off-site. Moving on to the practical observation, this is a 3-hour observation covering both preparation and service within the workplace. It enables the apprentice to demonstrate their working in an operational kitchen environment. The apprentice will have criteria and range that's highlighted in Annex D of the assessment plan, which you will be able to find out the range that needs covering. You must consider the best time to carry out the assessment and how best the apprentice can carry out the practical and synoptic approach, that will be given when observing competence. So the culinary challenge, this is a 2-hour observation in a controlled environment, maybe off-site in an appropriate facility and closed off during assessment. This assessment is an opportunity for the apprentice to demonstrate precision, creativity, and when producing a 2-course meal for 2 people. Again, you can reflect through the assessment plan, and that would be under Annex E. Once the on-demand test, practical observation and culinary challenge are complete, then the learner can complete the professional discussion. And this is a 40-minute discussion between the apprentice and the independent endpoint assessor. The review will also include a review of the apprenticeship's or the apprentice's recipe log from dishes that they prepared in the workplace. So the purpose of the professional discussion is to clarify any questions that the independent assessor may have as a result of their assessment or the assessment of the learner journey and practical observation. It's confirmation, and it also helps validate the judgment about the quality of work. It allows them to explore aspects of the work that's been carried out, including how it was carried out in a little bit more detail. And they can discuss how the apprentice would behave in specific scenarios should they not have occurred during the practical observation. Any questions in relation to the personal development and reflection may be asked at this point, and it can provide a basis for the independent assessor to make a decision on the grade to be awarded. So, Commis Chef, the grading for the on-demand test is graded at 70% for a pass, or between 70 and 84% for a pass, which would gather 1 point, and then 85% or above for a distinction, which is 2 points. For both practical observation and the culinary challenge, the assessor will be looking for competence to pass, which would be worth 1 point, and excellence for a distinction, which would be 3 points. And that, for the professional discussion, the competence will provide the apprentice with 1 point and excellence 2 points. And the overall grading criteria, for a pass they need to achieve 4 to 8 points or marks, and for a distinction 9 marks. So team member standards, first of all, quick poll.
Sure, you're going to see the polls on your screen shortly. This poll question is, which of the following apprenticeship specialist functions are you offering? Food and beverage service, alcoholic beverage, barista, food production, or housekeeping? Okay. So as you can see, half of you are offering food and beverage service, and that's followed by food at 40%.
Thank you. So team member standards, a hospitality team member, they can work in a range of establishments, for example, bars, restaurants, cafes, conference centres, banqueting venues, hotels, contract caterers. The role is very varied, and although hospitality team members tend to specialise in an area, they have to be adaptable and ready to support team members across the business. Their range is split into 3 sections. The range is 3 sections covering knowledge, skills, and behaviours. And before your specialist function, they closely look at people skills, customers, and understanding of the business. So the range to be covered can be found in the team member occupational standards, which is a standalone document outlining each module. More detail can be found in the assessment plan, which again outlines the pass and distinctions required and the method of assessment. So the following specialist functions are available for apprenticeships to follow. That's food and beverage service, alcohol beverage service, for which there are 3 routes, wine, mixology, or cask. There's also the barista, food production, concierge services, housekeeping, reception, reservations, and conference and events. Initially, we will be offering on-programme and endpoint assessments for food and beverage service, alcohol beverage service, and food production, with the others to follow shortly after. So Just concentrating on team member, the endpoint assessment is once again synoptic, takes place at the end of the apprentice learning and development, and after a minimum of 12 months on programme, at the end of the 12 months on programme, and it must be complete within 2 months. That's the endpoint assessment. The on-demand test, practical observation and culinary challenge must be completed prior to the professional discussion once again. And once again, the on-demand test is a 90-minute multiple choice scenario-based test covering the core elements and also the specialist function that the apprentice has gone down. Again, it's externally set and marked by City and Guilds, and it can be undertaken by the employer on the employer or premises or off-site. So the practical observation is a 2-hour observation covering both preparation and service in the workplace. It enables the apprentice to demonstrate their working in an operational environment. The apprentice must cover the criteria and range highlighted in Annex C of the assessment plan. And you must consider with this the best time to carry out the assessment. How best is the apprentice going to be able to carry out the practical, and within it a synoptic approach is given when observing competence. Then they have a business project. This is an 800 to 1200 word project focusing on the opportunities and the challenges, and the idea is that the apprentice will be able to look at how they can improve the business. So the work that they are providing will give the apprentice a wider understanding of the business that they're looking at. And the apprentice must first of all submit a 200 to 300 word proposal for discussion and approval. The project will confirm that the apprentice understands the business, maintains an up-to-date understanding of the trends and development within the industry, and identifying the needs for a project, gathering information and able to make recommendations. Once the on-demand test, the practical observation and the project are complete, they can then go forward for the professional discussion. And once again, the professional discussion is 40 minutes. And within that professional discussion, the apprentice will be able to present a reflective log. So the grading, I won't go right through it because it's very, very similar, or almost identical to that of Commis Chef. So the grading system is exactly the same, and it's based on competence and excellence for the professional discussion, practical observation, and the business project. So how can we support you to prepare for delivery and endpoint assessment? Moving on, there's a list of various resources and support that we can offer. We are working on these at present, and the timeline showing availability will be available and covered on a different slide. We will have smart screen resources, and as before, we'll have learning assistance. At present, we are developing a learner journal and EPA assessment packs, and more information on these will be provided in some slides in a short while. So the learner journey, that will be signposted to Maths and English, and also it will differentiate between a pass and a distinction. One thing to note is this apprenticeship does not include a qualification. However, it has been mapped, and an example is on the next slide, where we'll be continuing with existing qualifications for the foreseeable future. Also, support will be available on functional skills within it. So here I've just provided a brief example of a mapping exercise which is being carried out against a professional chef, against the new Commis Chef standards, and you can just see where it highlights areas that are covered and areas that are not, and we will be producing a document that would highlight exactly what is and what isn't covered. Now, the feedback from the majority of employers that I've spoken to particularly have a preference not to run a qualification alongside the occupational standards, and therefore focus on preparing the learners to be fully competent when achieving endpoint assessment. So the learner journal, some of the key features around the learner journal are tasks for the learner to complete to ensure that they have coverage of the Commis Chef or team member standards. Each will contain a list of key terms and the definitions, details on how each task relates to the standards and the differentiation between pass and distinction where applicable, and individual recipes will not necessarily be provided. Activities to check the apprentice understanding. Practical tasks to allow the learner to apply their knowledge and skills to their own role and their organisation. Reflective practice for learners to consider what they have learned, what they need to improve on and how to do it. And the learner journal will also provide a great evidence log with recipes, etc. A progress tracker and a list of key milestones, as well as information on how to use the manual as part of the programme. So the endpoint assessment pack, this is a key document for customers when planning and delivering their apprenticeship. It'll include the standard, guidance on how to book endpoint assessment, guidance on how each aspect of the endpoint assessment process can be carried out, guidance on planning required prior to endpoint assessment taking place, expectations during endpoint assessment, and feedback and completion of endpoint assessments. The pack will include the following: guidance. Sorry, this is for the endpoint assessment pack for independent endpoint assessors, and this pack will include guidance on how to review the portfolio against the relevant sections of the occupational brief, guidance on what they need to see as part of the practical observation, guidance on professional discussion, including the questions they need to ask and any prompting that may be necessary, and how to record the discussion. So the timeline of events. When do we intend moving to the? Sorry, we're moving on to the poll, aren't we? It's a poll question.
So we have the third and final poll question for you now. That'll be appearing on your screen shortly. So this poll is: when do you intend moving to the apprenticeship standards? We've already started, as soon as we can, in September, or we haven't as yet decided. Thank you for voting. The results are in. As you can see, the majority of you intend to start as soon as possible.
Thank you. I think it's important at this point to also advise you that new information around our endpoint assessment is now available on our website, and that's only just been released today, so it's definitely worth looking over. When do you intend on moving over to the new standards? That decision needs to be made pretty soon. Our aim is to have the learner journal in place for some time from September. You'll be able to register your learners on program through the Wall Garden, and again from September. This will help us identify the numbers or potential numbers for EPA required 12 months down the line. It's also likely that several apprenticeship pathways, as I mentioned earlier, may be withdrawn from 31st of October 2017. Price and offer. On-programme delivery and support with endpoint assessment for Commis chef, £1,195. Team member, £995. And these prices are based on a one-to-one experience for the endpoint assessment process. The approval process, just a few things around this. If you're a new City and Guilds provider, you would need to gain endpoint assessment financial approval. If you're a current City and Guilds centre, you will need to apply for endpoint assessment approval for the occupation that you wish to offer. If you would like to deliver the qualification linked to the standard, you will need to apply for qualification approval, the traditional QAP form. And this assessment pack will be available on the website once you've registered. So, endpoint assessment reservation. To reserve endpoint assessment, you will register your learner for the programme and for endpoint assessment, and then select the date 90 days prior to endpoint assessment taking place. This is when an EPA fee is charged, dates are then agreed, and endpoint assessment carried out, and data is capture form is then issued. The provider then submits EPA, and ESFA data and gateway declaration is then provided to City and Guilds. After a successful endpoint assessment, grades are agreed. The provider or employer receives City and Guilds endpoint assessment certification. the data form is uploaded, ESFA issue the certificate of apprenticeship standards, and then you would also be able to register for World Chef's digital badge if you're doing the Commis Chef standards. Just a little bit of information on becoming an endpoint assessor. You can simply apply online, or once this is open for hospitality and catering, which will be coming shortly, and the links there provided. Next steps, you typically need to look at your offer. What does it look like? Who will you be targeting? And what occupations and routes will appeal to you or your local area? You need to look at the 20% offer for off-program. Consider some of those learner milestones that would take part in the learner journey. Look at your staffing and essentially the skills within your staffing structure as well, particularly around the 20% off program. And how do you see endpoint assessment being carried out? So further support, we can carry out an audit of your current apprenticeship strategy. We can define your apprenticeship offer, and we can also support the upskilling of your current team should you require it. And again, there's more information there on the slide and a link to further details. And finally, for the final slides, we'll just quickly go through these final slides, which you will be sent. There's just some further links on the information regarding City and Guilds apprenticeships, the funding rules and guidance standards that you can take a closer look at. And again, there's more useful resources on the next slide. And finally, I'd just like to thank you all for listening. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Jason. So we've now got time for some questions. If you haven't already done so, please type your questions into the question tab. We'll try and answer as many as we can now. And if we do miss any, we'll put them onto the questions and answers document we send out at the end of this webinar. So, first question is, can Commis Chef be delivered remotely with a year plan and assessments as normal?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Can Commis Chef be delivered remotely with a year plan and assessments as normal?
Bill Twig, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Basically, as far as the on-program delivery is concerned, the ownership it does belong to the employer and provider. So if you want to use a mechanism where you are providing continuous assessment on the job and training on the job, then that is fit for purpose to deliver the apprenticeship.
Okay. Can only one route for the team member be assessed per centre?
No, you would be you'd be able to use more than one route for team member.
Okay. Are you providing any other learning resources, for example, textbooks?
Initially, there will be smart screen resources. There may be future developments on textbooks, but at the moment, it's typically around the smart screen offering.
Okay, I think we've still got time for a few more. Are you providing the 90-minute test? And when do you see this being live for us to register the learners?
We will be providing a paper-based practice test to prepare the learner for Gateway, and registration from September.
And the online test or the endpoint assessment will be available once you've met the criteria to meet endpoint assessment for the learner.
Okay, someone's interested in the Chef de Partie standard, and it wasn't mentioned. They're asking, when will this be rolled out?
Yeah, Chef de Partie is slightly behind the other two level 3 occupations, which we'll be rolling out shortly. So you're probably looking at more the end of the year with Chef de Partie.
Okay. We've got time for one more. Do you have prices for resets and breakdown of costs for each part of the EPA?
Don't have exact prices for resets yet. However, within the Commis Chef, it would probably sit within inside your 20%. Yeah, there would be a cost around the reset.
Endpoint, we'll be publishing the reset costs very shortly.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got time for one or two more. Are all 4 aspects for the EPA done by an independent body?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that one.
Okay.
They're asking, are all 4 aspects for the endpoint assessment done by an independent body?
Yes, they are.
All aspects of the endpoint assessment will be carried out through the endpoint assessment organisation, which in this case is City and Guilds.
Okay. What will be the time frame between requesting endpoint assessment and then completing endpoint assessment?
It's within 2 months. It needs to be done complete within a 2-month window.
Am I right in thinking the World Chef digital badge will be accepted worldwide?
It is indeed accepted worldwide, and more information on the World Chef's badge can be available through the website.
And this is a unique offering of City and Guilds together in partnership with the consortium, World Chef Consortium.
Okay. Do these prices include the use of smart screen?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Just going through the questions. Remember, if you have any questions, please type them into the tab and we'll answer them. Is there any cost to register the learners?
Yes, there'll be approximately a 10% cost to register learners, and we'll be publishing that shortly.
Okay. Does the £1,195 charge include endpoint assessment, or is this an additional cost?
No, it does include endpoint assessment.
It's an all-inclusive cost for the whole programme.
Okay. We've got a question here. Someone is asking if you can please confirm the withdrawal dates for hospitality frameworks.
I can't confirm at the moment as they are in consultation, but the date that has been suggested is October 31st of this year.
Okay. A few more questions. When do you think the mapping to existing qualifications will be ready?
We already have the mapping for the Commis chef, and there is work to be done on team member. That should be available, well, they will be available for September.
One point about the qualification, because the qualification isn't required by the standard, then the cost of registration and certification of the apprenticeship, of the qualification rather, is not covered by funding, but the training and development to deliver the qualification is.
Okay. How many retakes are learners able to do?
Ooh, do you know, I'm not sure about that one.
As far as we understand, there is no limit currently being offered as advised for us from the Trailblazer Group.
Okay. Is there a log and challenge for team member?
Is there all, sorry?
From Tracy Butler, if you could clarify that question, we've got, is there a log and challenge for team member? No? Okay, Tracy, if you could clarify that in the questions tab, we'll get back to you in the Q&A document we send out after this webinar. And we've got a question here. Will there be a mapping document for the hospitality supervision?
Hospitality supervision, yes, that will be, yeah.
Okay, and I'll do one final question, and that is, what is the cost of the qualification if a provider wants to add it in as added value?
Those costs are available on the wall garden, typically around about £90, but I can't confirm off the top of my head.
Yes, so if you go on the wall garden, the current qualification prices would stand.
Okay, and the final one for today, the 10% cost for registration, and the question is, when is this taken?
We're looking for registration to be taken at the first point of contact and agreement that you're going to use City and Guild services.
Well, if a current apprentice is currently on a level 2, can we progress them to a current level 3, or do we need to change to a new qualification?
I think that's pretty much down to the provider's the decision of where they think their competence lies, and that's through initial assessment. Really, I can't really answer that without them.
Giving some much more finer detail.
Yeah.
And on that note, I want to say thank you to our presenters, Jason Benn and Bill Twigg. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be sending a copy of the webinar along with the slides and the question and answers document out shortly.
Thank you.